all set to bring to you our fireside chat on infrastructure as a service, the rise of public and private partnership. A very, very important segment for us out here, where we're about to present to you our esteemed panelists here on stage. To moderate this segment, may I welcome Mr. Kushal Singh, partner, Deloitte India. Let's hear a round of applause as he joins us on stage. Let me also request for all of you all to take a seat as per the names. Let's have the slides up on the screen. May I also welcome our esteemed panelists. It's a delight to have amongst us Mr. Ajay Saxena, Senior Advisor, National Investment and Infrastructure Fund. Please do put your hands together as Sir joins us. Let's also welcome amongst us Ms. Vidya, Basarkod, Managing Director, Ramboll, India. An absolute privilege to have you be a part of this very important segment, ma'am. Thank you for gracing the occasion. May I also present to you yet another industry veteran. We have with us Mr. Rajeev, Shrikhande, Managing Director, Shrikhande Consultants. Let's hear a round of applause as he steps forward. We're looking at a discussion time of about 15 minutes, and then the last sigh for my wonderful audience. That is time permitting, of course. Let me now hand over to Mr. Singh. All yours.
Yeah. Am I audible? Yeah. Thanks everyone for having me here and having us here. I'm also talking on behalf of the panelists. Infrastructure as a service is something that is not new. It has started a little bit more than a decade back, where we talked about giving infrastructure for services. What we are going to discuss in this fireside chat is the advent of data centers and their usability in PPPs and other aspects. So I'll start with Mr. Saxena. Like we are aware that there are a lot of initiatives that are happening in this sector, and organizations, financial institutions are evaluating investment options also. So what do you think are the views on infrastructure as a service, and what enable enterprises to lease or rent these services, and what could be the impact of that on government services?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. So yes, first of all, yes, this is the need of the hour. Everything that we are doing, and we have learned in the last session also, everything is moving towards some kind of a digitalization. Some digitization is happening, some IT element is coming even in the road sector, even in the physical infrastructure. Now here we are talking about the infrastructure as a service, which is pure pure IT, and how the things can improve, or what are all the things we can structure and how to structure. I think where you are coming from, whether it is a lease or how to take this, and who all would be requiring. First of all, everybody means if we talk about this, so even the smart cities, everything that we have seen in the past 1 decade has moved towards the IT enabled services. So when you are moving IT enabled services, you require the servers, you require the IT infrastructure, you require all sorts of things. There is a small part of it where the applications are developed, where the software is being developed, but the developing a software has to reside at some place, has to be there on the cloud. So there has to be infrastructure. So these segments are segregated into different institutions. So the biggest of all would be like, everybody can have the earlier, just 10 years before or 20 years before, everybody used to have their own servers and on the localized servers and this thing. Now the cloud computing has come. So there are people who are providing the large infrastructure, IT infrastructure, and there are people who are providing the application services, and then there are departments who are using, and then comes the user. So these sorts of segregation we can see. Now, if one person is coming with the data, with the server, the application and software, everything is coming, it's this thing. So the costing and the pricing is easier. Now, when it is like most of the people have to share, and the requirement is going out of the roof, and then there are people who are providing the large infrastructure. So Azure, the Amazon, and the people like that, they are providing these cloud computing servers. And then there are data center people who are coming in. So they don't have the business in the downstreams. They have the business at here. Now, how do we structure? So, and who are all the needing? Government definitely requires it. means every government has we are moving towards the e-governance. Anything that you name is on even your birth and the other records are there on this thing. We are putting all the things. We are having the mobiles, and with the mobile app, we are even depositing our property taxes also. So who is doing that? So there are the developers who are providing one set of this thing. How do they get compensated? So there are two things. I sell it as a product, or I make that thing and make it available on a rental basis. So most of these organizations, or most of the large scale IT infrastructure service providers, they are providing in terms of the on the lease rents and this thing. The government can always do the things in partnering with them. They can provide some kind of the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure space also. There, whenever we are talking about the government infrastructure, government IT services being decided on a private sector, there is a security issue, which I am sure you would be talking about in the session throughout. So the better would be that yes, the government constructs a project where in the public-private partnership, this is what we are trying to explore, where the private sector comes in, put up the IT infrastructure in place, and the government and the other users, they become the users, they put up their application on that. There would be lots of many advantages. It would be shared resources available, so my cost of development would come down, and then I am not charged at the capital, I am charged on the rental. So again, it is not eating out my capital, this thing. And also people like opening to the funds, or opening to the people who are able to invest in this thing. Till the time a sizable investment comes for any kind of a development, the private equities are not very much interested. But if we segregate into the first aspect, that yes, the large scale infrastructure has to be provided by a private sector, definitely there would be fund houses who have the capacity and who can deploy the fund over there.
Thank you, Ajay ji. Ms. Vidya, we have seen this IAS field being expanding quite rapidly. In fact, recently data centers were included in the harmonized list of infrastructure, and they are now eligible for VGF. How do you see government handling the issue related to security and viability of such kind of projects?
Thank you, Kushal. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for having me here. I would like to take this. Speaking and hello. Yeah. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for having me here, ETH and Times Now. For your question, Kushal, I would like to take some cues from what the earlier panelists spoke, because I belong to an industry where we put up physical infrastructure like airports, highways, roads, bridges, buildings, etc. And all the panelists in the previous session spoke about how important it is to improve our quality of services, how we deliver our projects. And that is exactly what I want to carry forward to this session, because I am an end user of the infrastructure as services providers. I'm not sure if any service providers are here in the audience, but this is something that I would like to take it to them as my important stakeholders. So one is on the security aspect that the government needs to focus on. I belong to a consultancy organization which has projects and offices all over the world. That means the jurisdiction is all over the world. And we have requirement for the IT infrastructure as service for every office, for every project that is running across the world. So that itself provides a lot of complexity for the service provider, as well as for the government. Because the governments across the world have their own guidelines, their own compliance requirements, especially very stringent in Europe and the Nordic countries, where we as Ramboll have stronghold in projects. So that complexity is something that we need to navigate. Again, going back to the physical infrastructure industry, we have a lot of lessons that we can learn from the regulatory aspects, that especially in aviation, in telecom and towers, which have been very recent, which are dynamic markets by themselves, and which are, I think, far more mature regulatory environment than any of the other industries. So I think stakeholder consultation as end users, as industry partners, is something that the government needs to focus on. And there you will get a lot of lessons from earlier experiences and a lot of insights on what the user wants. And that is something that will go in your security aspects. And on the viability, it's again a demand supply game. What happens with most of the service providers is that they do not really take robust inputs from their user community. They just go and try to do all the capital expenditure in the initial stage and then want to recover all that spend from the first set of customers, which is completely killing the game. So I would like them to be cautious, go in a phased manner of investment, phased manner of expansion, look at how the demand is growing in your industry, and accordingly phase your supply. And then you will be assured of your customers and the kind of rentals that you would ask from your customers. So then it becomes a balancing act which you can make it viable instead of completely depending on viability gap funding right from the beginning. That is not a business model that I can advocate today. Thank you, Kushal.
Thank you. Let's move to Rajeev ji. Rajeev ji, urban rejuvenation is something that has been a talk of the town for so many years. How do you see IaaS as a tool that can help in the smart city mission of India?
Hello. Hello, good morning, and thanks for having me here. Thanks to Times Now. I think that the real question is that what is a really smart city concept? As we all know, it always, smart infrastructure, smart healthcare, smart, mobility. These are these aspects of smart city, but ultimately it is a smart citizen that we have to understand. So, for infrastructure as a service, you can have tremendous data with you, and this data can be collated because that is the way it works. But also, you have to understand there are some key questions that we have to understand and ask. How do we integrate all the services? What are the security aspects of that? And ultimately, how you make the citizen a smart citizen? So that means it has. I know that IaaS has got a very high, a scalability model, but ultimately it also has a limitation that it has to be, the training has to be pretty rigorous, and it is not going to be very easy. So I think it is happening in India. I understand that, but the point is, it has to have a conscious effort to really address these issues, and these key questions need to be understood and addressed. Then only I think the smart city mission can have this kind of IaaS as a as a service model to work in a proper way. Ultimately, it has to have a very cohesive society. That's what it means. So I think that's what it should be. Thank you.
As a follow up to that, while we have seen some of the tier 1 cities or the metro cities picking up a lot of the capacity for IaaS, what should be 2 or 3 key suggestions for this service or this facility having more penetration in tier 2 or tier 3 cities, because that is where we see a lot of gap in the service delivery compared to the tier 1 cities?
I think the first thing is the will to have it. You need to have will. The municipal corporations, the local bodies must adopt these technologies, fintech, and also they must have kind of a task force, Kushalji, so that this is implemented in a phase-wise fashion, so that it becomes a very cohesive model. But the ultimate thing is the will. They must take the initiative, and they must go on evolving themselves to adopt this technology. Thank you.
Sure. So if I understand correctly, basically somebody needs to take up the mental and start telling the municipal corporations in tier 2, tier 3 cities about the benefit IaaS can provide to them. Vidya ji, one question to you on the environmental aspects of data centers. Typically a data center is measured in terms of the energy it consumes. a 5 megawatt data center, a 20 megawatt data center. Obviously, it comes along with some environmental concerns on that. Uh, Keeping in view the SDG goals, the environmental concerns and the zero emission targets that every country has adopted now. What are your views on, 2 or 3 key things that the government should be looking at? Because we have certain data centers that are like 15 years old. So what should the government be looking towards that?
Thanks for that question. And it is so apt that as a Ramboll, we have a declared objective of being partner for sustainable change. So we are looking at data centers and their clients as somebody that we should advise on how to make that asset sustainable. And as all of us know, because of the digital consumption of all the citizens across the world, the energy intensive, water intensive assets of data centers have a lot to answer for. As it is, India is the third largest market for data centers, and we are water stressed, energy stressed, highly polluting cities already. So I think it becomes very responsible for the government to see what kind of emissions will be there for each of the data centers and how to control them right at the point of conceiving that data center. Not at the end of the operating cycle, the whole life cycle of that asset. How are the emissions coming out and how do we improve that right at the beginning of the concept? And of course, Ramboll is very well positioned to advise on that, because we have recently acquired a company of data centers advocacy in the US. And this is very important that we control emissions, we control water consumptions, and heat. That is, we are all aware now the urban centers are heat islands. So I think it's a very responsible take that the government has to address. And on its own, it will not be able to do. There are a lot of experts, a lot of consultants. They must involve all of us in making that roadmap for data center market that India is going to be. Thank you.
Thank you. A last question, Ajay, to you. While we have been talking about what the government should do, how to increase the penetration, maybe your take on what should the private sector do to get ready for this, onslaught of increased data consumption and more requirement of data centers, and how they can join hands with the government to provide better services, less environmental concerning services.
So this environmental concern would remain because the data centers consume lots of power and this thing. The mitigation is definitely how to shift those data center to a place where it is not much the heat is generated, but it is controlled also. My suggestion on this particular point would be, yes, the water is required. Instead of using the potable water, we should start using or promoting the wastewater treatment plants more and more in such vicinities, and that treated water should be supplied to this thing. This is the smallest thing that can be done till the time we reach to a place where we start putting the things into the some other water or the reservoir. On the private sector side, yes, as of now, this remains in the private sector domain. It is not under PPP as of now. So I know certain government who have their own data centers and running the applications on their own things, or the private sector which is providing the on the lease basis, on the service charge basis, the applications or something which is running, or the services to the private sector and also to the smaller government. Now, when it is coming to this thing, so data centers and any other such things would definitely require a lots of cost in putting up the plant at the land located in the city or somewhere. So the government, the private sector should come up with some kind of this thing. And it is not that we are talking just now. This is already happening. This has started happening, where the government has started identifying the land, and the land is coming to the private sector, which is where it is putting up the infrastructure for the services, and which is bringing the cost of renting it out further. Okay, and also the private sector has come up with some kind of a like a overarching development of the portal. One such thing which I was involved in the procurement of one thing which we did for NIUA, I can take this thing. It cannot be 100% technically categorized under the infrastructure as a service, but it is the digital platform, the public digital platform, which is now known as OPO, which has put up the whole kind of a e-government portal. And now the municipalities can, instead of doing their own, they can pick and choose their own application, like a property tax, or there are modules which have already been put up. So these things are being shared. So mostly the private people are required to do the large scale development where the capital investment is required, and then they can structure it with the help of the government grant scheme. They can structure these things on that basis. That makes it easier for the government sector not to put up or not to repeat. Also, they don't have the kind of an expertise which is required, and also we can have the philosophy very well adopted also, where the best people is doing the best thing, or the best domain person is doing the best job. So the government understands the smaller application developers, they know how to develop the small applications, and then there are large scale IT infrastructure companies who know how to do this thing, and then there is a government who has put up their applications, and ultimately benefiting, everybody is benefiting, only it is with the aim of benefiting the users. So the private sector has to reach out, and the government also has to come up with the scheme. The schemes are in place. We just have to do the more awareness. The conferences like this and the discussions like this may definitely be more helpful for them. And once these are, and I can see, and I have also invested in a data center. Okay, so there are many other data centers coming from the private sector. Marrying the government would make it little costlier, a little less costlier, and which would definitely be helping the application developers and the municipalities at the later stage. All the government also, it is not only the municipalities. And we can see that nowadays, everything means, even you talk about the traffic management, you talk about the telemedicine, you talk about the data health data analytics. I know some startups who have started collecting, like who has started providing services to the all of us, means who have to maintain our health record for a doctor to see. So most of the time we go to the doctor and we don't find the earlier papers and everything. But there are service providers who come up and who have put up the application like this. But these application providers would definitely need a back-end support from the IT infrastructure. So that's where, if we are able to see this development into these 3-4 categories, I think the marriage would be easier, and it will be less costlier to all of us.
Thank you, Ajay ji. Thank you, Vidya ji and Rajeev ji. I think we are out of our time, and thank you for this interesting discussion and presenting your views. We really look forward for development of infrastructure as a service much more in the country, and hopefully the benefit will also come to the citizens also. Thank you.
Kushal, can I just make a small request to all my fellow citizens here? I know it is okay to expect the government and the industry to do something about data centers, but as citizens, I think we must be very responsible in using data. Every time we click on our mobile phones, we are activating that data center, which consumes a lot of energy. Just because we don't see the heat or the smoke here doesn't mean that we are doing something very green. Let us be very responsible in this.
Second that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidya ma'am, for making that important segment stand out there. And like you said, we all need to be very conscious as citizens and not just hope for the government or the private sector to do it all. It really is a partnership with conscious citizens as well. So let's hear a round of applause for our wonderful panelists out here. And a big thank you to Mr. Singh for really creating such a balanced thought from our esteemed panelists. I'm sure each of you shared thoughts with us, and we have so very many key takeaways from this panel discussion on infrastructure as a service, and how is it that we can create that public and private partnership in a better future, which is also in accordance with our theme for the event. Thank you so very much.